Hello Miss, my name is Pravina Murugan. ID number DEM 0921109, bed 25A. Now I tell about introduction. The authors noted a more repeat increases in the number of women convicted of offense than in the corresponding number of men, which they left might be explained by reference to women impersonation, with women being assumed to have followed in men's footstep even in relationship to the movement full equality as a darker side. In the same way that women are demanding equal opportunity.
My name is Eric Melkishirek Analaki Kamleshwaran. My ID number is DEM 07221145. Research have observed and sustained reduction in property crime Europe since beginning of the 1990s. The argument of behavior change at least partly explained by increasing security measure targeting more serious thief offense, breaking and entering will Steve is conceived. A more open question is that how the ecosystem economic composition of those convinced of offense might be changing, and this might in turn be affecting the gender gap. Moreover, have noted that further insight into possibility divergent sex-specific violence rate across population subgroup needed, but inquiry must await the development of richer data set. Although the server provide are discouraging, there are few cases for meaningful analysis because youth from disadvantaged background and less likely to be included in household or schools served. Since also similar in surplus in. We know from self-report study that less serious offending during the teenage years is relatively common across all social groups, but more typically is poorly resourced group who traditionally suffer when the law enforcement regime pay increased attention to the mirror offense. In a situation characteristic by the net winding, we might therefore country to conference in 1985 suggests expanded increased social economic inequalities in the risk of criminal conviction and increased inflow of both women and men from poor social economic background.
Hi Miss, I'm Ruben Anali Subia. My ID number DEM 0821014. I'm from batch 25A. The first point is implication for the current study. We will argue that there are many important lessons to be learned from the debate on a declining gender gap, but there is also a major value in examining these issues on the basis of both new data and in the different social content than that represented by the United States, which has dominated the debate. If, for example, one believes that the criminal convictions among women is increasing as a result of an expansion in the types of offenses that are being dealt with by the court. A greater inflow of first and foremost young women who are being convicted for minor offenses. In this case, analysis of sanctions that are imposed are also of interest, since the code follows the principle that equivalent acts are treated equally when determining sanctions. Data on the sanctions are less affected by the changes in reporting propensities. If the decline in the gender gap is due to women having emulated the more serious offending patterns of men, then we should also see changes in the gender differences found in the compensations of the sanctions imposed by the court, not last in relation to the more serious sanctions, where the gender distribution should become more equal over time. As women gain greater equality with men, the maid dominated judicial process likely treat them with less difference and impose more stringent sanctions.
Hello Miss, my name is Dineshwaran Mohan, DM09211064. Today I would like to give another point for the reason why the gender gap in crime is decreasing. The point is the gender nature of net widening. Firstly, there is much indicate that society has become increasingly intolerant in its reaction to the over recent decades. Politicians and the justice system have hidden the research that advocates early interventions about even minor misdemeanors rather than the research that points to the negative labeling effects of police intervention. The range of the acts that are viewed as requiring a justice system reaction has expanded, which has led to minor forms of crime and particularly violence being reported to the police increasingly often. The increases that are visible in the crime statistic, for example, considering convictions for violent crime, could therefore be seen as an effect of net widening rather than of an increase in the propensity for crime. There is an increase in the total number of devices getting into the system in the first place, and many of these are new devices who will not have been processed previously. They come from precisely those backgrounds, fewer previous arrests, minor or no offences, good employment record, better education, younger female, which all research suggestions being overall indicators of greater success. We agree that a net widening process will lead us to accept a larger share of female offenders. However, we will argue that what to accept when it comes to the social background of these offenders is more than an open question. There are both policy empirical studies indications be directed towards less resourceful groups of individuals. The development of the legal instrument device to control bad behavior and how they are applied leaves no doubt that the marginalized poor have been the main objects of control, and the consequences often disproportionate to the action that trick or the intervention. Why they can net widening be assumed to affect the gender gap rather than being gender natural process. As stated briefly, this is due to the well-established fact that the proportion of offenders comprised of women is greater in minor forms of offending than it is for more serious crimes. For example, street violence between non-acquaintances that results in serious physical and sometimes fatal injuries is a type of crime in which men constitute a large majority of both perpetrators and victims. These crimes have long been viewed as falling naturally within the limit of the justice system, and they have therefore also been characterized by a low dark figure. Less serious forms of violence that occur in private, at school, or in the workplace are associated with a considerably more even gender distribution among both victims and perpetrators. The violence that occurs in this context also more often involves perpetrators and victims who know another, which produces a situation where involving the police and the justice system is not viewed as the natural option to the same extent. There are, of course, many more offences of this kind than there are of the more serious violent offences, although this is not always visible in official crime statistics. An analysis of changes in the dark figure, for example, was able to show that analysis
Rutra, and my ID number is DM08211016. Now the point I'm going to tell about changes in women's behavior. The idea that women will lead to increased offending among women and thus to a decrease in the gender gap is nothing new. Sutherland 1947, for example, in his classic work on the criminology, assumed that as the social roles of men and women, so women's crime levels will rise and gradually catch up with those of men.
The same idea can found in the similarly classic work in the field of sociology. Women's crime increase, but to begin with the slower rate than men, then the proportions of the woman increases. This is particularly true for the very young woman. One doesn't have to look too far for the reason for this increase. It accompanies their increasing participation in working life outside the home. Those who maintain that the gender gap has declined as a result of changes in women's behavior rather than men's have thus long that women crime levels have been held in check, but they will increase as women move towards equality with men. A recent debate focused on the central machines that are viewed as lying behind the increased propensity for crime among women, a decline in the level of informal control in combination with an increase in the opportunities for crime and for a critical review. One common explanation, for example, is that the increasing number of divorces has affected girls more than boys. The idea here is that the control exercised by the family has traditionally been focused on monitoring young girls and not least their sexual behavior. A decline in informal control provides girls with more opportunities to also engage in crime. Perhaps the most central and widely debated explanation, however, focus on the loss of the informal control and an increase in the opportunities for crime via increased gender equality and women's. Indication of such a trend are found, for example, in the increase in the number of women in traditional male educational and occupational arenas, and in the way girls are raised more equally and are thus also subject to less control than previously.
Hi Miss, my name is Kalidas Maliki Sivanathan. My ID number DEM0921042. The media often describes popular version of the criminological explanation and an interesting allematics description are the same on the both sides of Atlantic. The rise of Britain gangster girls are the trend both positive and negative. It's a good if women assert themselves more in school, for example, and on the labor market. But it's a bad when they emulate the descriptive behavior of men. I'll test the explanation of the harmony with a number of traditional criminological theories. They can nonetheless be problem. The argument that an increase in women participation in work leads to a smaller gender gap in a crime of the repudiated. For example, they note the increase the pay work among women following World War II was primarily assisted with the influx of older married workers from the middle class group, was the involvement in crime cannot reasonably be expected to have increased substantially. This was confirmed by their analysis of police recruitment in the city. They increased the number of the female offenders between 1950 and 1976. It did not alter the fact that around 75% of the women registered of crime when unemployed. Another problem is the explanation that are based on the behaviorally change among women are strictly of the based on a view that crime increase more and less continuously as a result of the reduced controls and increased opportunities. The problem of course that athletics increase beside everlasting and increased possibility for crime may also be explained by change statistic relation crime and discuss more details below. Today is central question rather that what might explanation and substitution crime draw witnesses in Western world over recent declared as a statistic research and ignoring the possibility that the decline in the gap might just easily be due to a decline in crime among men as the increase in women offending is therefore important. When logistic reviewed the data for the years 1973 until 2005, they were feature able to show that the decline in gender gap is not being driven by an increase in women's offending but rather by greater decline in offending women.
Everyone, I'm Pritika, daughter of David, ID number DEM0821081, batch 25A. I want to explain about changes in men's behavior. First of all, to the extent that increased gender equality is associated with the reduced gender gap in crime, then it will be at least a reasonable to look at how this emancipation process may have affected the reduction in male crime as to look at the perceived increase in female crime. In addition, support for a gender crime drop may be found in theories that emphasize the significance of changes in both propensity for crime and the opportunity structure. On the basis of institutional anomy theory, increased equality should decrease men's propensity for crime. Next is, as men assume a greater responsibility for the family social life, for housework and for childcare, and in return has less responsibility for the household economy, men's export to enemy pursuer declines.
Hi madam, my name is Logan Anlakishadaran. My ID number is TM09211100 from batch 25A. Today I am going to talk about changes in men's behavior. If we look instead to opportunity theories and changed activity patterns, Cohen and Felsen 1979, we can of course point to the fact that many crime prevention strategies, example informed CCTV surveillance and improved security, have fostered especially on the large number of properties offences for which men constitute an overwhelming majority of perpetrators. Briefly stated, instead of proceeding on the basis of an assumption that it is a woman's low level of involvement in crime that is abnormal and that should therefore increase with an increase in gender equality and more towards men's normal level of criminality. It is possible that the decline in the gender gap may just as easily be linked to a greater crime drop and to process that have a greater effect, especially on men's involvement in crime. Thank you.
Salam sejahtera. I am Umar Magendran. My ID number is 0821122. Today I would like to talk about the data on the historical trend in the gender gap. The first one is the data are naturally also affected by changes in the view of and definition of crime. Secondly, incidents that are not previous to constitute serious offence to warrant reporting to the authorities will not be dealt with by the courts either. For the example, there are few convictions for assaulted against women and children in violence of this kind was that time rarely prevention as a crime. There is good reason to assume that men and women who commit offences have historically been dealt with differently. The next one is, in order to reduce the effect of isolated outlier, the series has been smoother using 5 years moving average. Another point is the gender gap has been calculated in terms of the ratio between the proportion of convicted men and women. Thank you.
Hi Miss, my name is Kuvilashini, daughter of Ravindran. My ID number is DPI 082190. I'm from batch 25A. Based on this topic, I have find some data and method. My first point is enhanced data for 3 birth cohorts. Analysis of the gender gap are usually based on annual crime statistics showing how many men and women have been registered for different types of crime during a given observation year. Using a longitudinal birth cohort approach makes it possible to show how large a proportion of given birth cohorts have been convicted of crime at least once over the course of more than a single year. By extending the observation period to several years, the data become less sensitive to the dark figure of crime, low detection risk. The strength of the cohort approach is thus that the risk of being convicted and registered for crime is cumulative at the individual level as the year pass, and thus comparison of the gender gap become more comprehensive. For 3 cohorts, those born in 1965, 1975 and 1985, they have collected detailed data compiling information from different individual-based registers for the entire Swedish population. This allows us to see in more detail which types of theft and violence offenses the men and women have been convicted of. Furthermore, they are able to link sanction to the offense for which the individuals have been convicted and thereby obtain a measure of how serious the offense have been assessed to be by the courts.
Greetings to Ms. Tanalakshmi. I am Surya Marin from Policing and Investigation Faculty and my ID number is TPI 0721194. In conclusion, the decreasing gender gap in crime is due to an increasing number of women committing crimes. Women criminality is a result of diverse socio-economic, cultural, and environmental factors resultant of westernization and urbanization. Other than that, gender gap in crime has been produced by different processes at different parts of this post-war period. Gender gap in crime is decreased due to an increased inflow of minor types of theft and violent crimes. Women comprise a large proportion of those who makes minor offenses than those who make serious offenses. So, developments like this will automatically produce a decline in the gender gap. Here ends our presentation. Thank you.